Good afternoon, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Deb Hackathorn, principal at Civic Point Government Relations. I'm also a member of the CMC Board of Trustees. Welcome to CMC's annual Jeffrey Family Legacy Fund Forum, which every year spotlights efforts to promote a thriving, equitable, and sustainable community. I'm so pleased that you're with us today. Let's take a moment to thank today's sponsors: Battelle, CK Construction, and the Jeffrey Company. We'd also like to thank Grange Insurance Audubon Center and its terrific staff for their support. Thank you as well to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for presenting today's live stream, which is carried on CMC's social media platforms. Join me in thanking all of our supporters for today's forum. Ohio's high-tech employers will need growing numbers of trained and passionate STEM employees as the state welcomes 2 new Intel plants, plus an array of other new high-tech industries. How can we close the gender and pay gap and fuel Ohio's workforce growth, particularly in the high-demand science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields? That is the subject of today's community conversation. And to introduce our speakers, please welcome Wes Hall from today's sponsor, Battelle. Wes, you're up.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of Battelle, we're thrilled to be the sponsor of today's event for a critical conversation that is near and dear to our hearts at Battelle. If you don't know about Battelle, we apply science and technology to some of the world's toughest problems every single day. STEM is in the DNA of what we do, and it's the future workforce. And that is exactly why we invest in STEM education as our philanthropic purpose. We provide opportunities for students around the country to get a well-rounded STEM education. And I'm honored to say that through our philanthropic funding and the work of our partners across the country, we impacted over 1.4 million students last year in K-12 education. So, yeah, thank you. We're excited about it too. And I shouldn't have to say this, but pay equity for women in STEM fields matters, and it matters to Battelle very deeply. As a matter of fact, each year, Battelle does a third-party study, an external study of pay equity across our company. Both gender, race, and ethnicity are the qualifications, and there is no pay discrepancy amongst genders at Battelle. And so it's really important to us. It's really important to us to lean into that. That's us living our values, us living our beliefs that diversity, equity, and inclusion do matter, and it does create the workplace of the future, and women have an incredible role in the STEM fields of the future. So I'm excited about that work. I'm grateful to see so many partners here in the room that have contributed to our impact in the community and can join with us to help shift that paradigm for pay equity in the future. And so at this time, it's my great pleasure to welcome and introduce today's speakers. Excited to see so many friends behind the microphones today, too. First of all, Lori Gillette, the CEO of CK Construction. Dr. Ayanna Howard, Dean of the College of Engineering at The Ohio State University. Tammy Wharton, President and CEO of the Girl Scouts of Ohio's Heartland. And our host today, Sherry Chaney Jones, founder and CEO of Sure Impact, and founder and president of Measurement Resources Company. And you can read more about today's speakers in the forum flyer on your tables. Sherry, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. So before we get to the questions of these amazing women, I think it's important that we discuss the current realities that we face when we look at gender and pay gap in STEM fields here in Central Ohio, as well as across the country. As we all know, there's a significant lack of representation of women in STEM fields. Women make up nearly half the workforce, yet are drastically underrepresented in key lucrative fields, including STEM careers, where only 18% of leadership roles are held by women. Women are underrepresented in other growing fields, with just 11% of construction jobs. And think about how many cranes you're seeing across the city right now are filled by women. 15% of engineers and architects are women, and only 6% of welders. Also, this is, we can look at, those are adults, those are people currently working. But if we go to our girls today, a recent study that came out by the Girls Index, which was a national survey of more than 10,000 girls, showed that 46% of high school girls did not think they were smart enough for their dream jobs. This is today, ladies and gentlemen. Also, 70% of girls believe that there are certain jobs that are better for men than women, and 1/3 say that they stay away from leadership positions because they don't want people to think they are bossy. So we've got a lot of work to do. This topic is extremely important. Additionally, my company, Measurement Resources Company, has worked with leaders across the state that receive National Science Foundation Includes grants. And they fund innovative projects designed to increase the participation of underrepresented groups in STEM fields. And this includes women. And one thing that we've found through our research is that one of the most important things we can do for young women to reduce that underrepresentation is have role models. They just don't see women like them. So luckily we have 2 women on our panel that are those role models. So I want to start with Dr. Howard and Lori. This question's for you. You've defied the statistics. You are leaders in STEM. Why did you decide a STEM career, and what specific obstacles, if any, have you experienced that may be different than your male counterparts? So, whichever one wants to go first.
All right, so I'm a non-traditional academic. My first career was at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where I led basically future rover navigation for Mars. And I will say now I'm Dean of Engineering here. Of the 23, I'm the 23rd Dean, first woman Dean of Engineering at The Ohio State University. But I think one of the things that brought me into STEM very early on was I liked technology. You know, I was a geek that wore dresses and climbed trees. And I think with that push, and my dad was an engineer, my mom was a mathematician, and so they just assumed that girls could do anything. And yeah, you can also wear dresses and you can also play with dolls, but if you're techie, you push that. And so I always knew I wanted to be an engineer. I think when I first got into the workplace, started at NASA, there was this thing of I was the second woman in the rover division. And it was like, oh, they let you in. And that was kind of the sentiment the entire time, even though I was leading teams of engineers that were in a lot of cases older than me. That was a sentiment. And I think one of the things is that it was what I loved. It was basically the only thing that I felt I was good at. I didn't like reading. I didn't like the writing, but I could do math. I could do science. I could code. And so I think that's what kept me interested. It was a thing I felt really good about. And even when people said, no, you're not good, I think one of the things about technology is you prove through your abilities. And so you can do time and time again, it's proving through your abilities, and no one can take that away from you. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you. It's a good story. Thank you for having us here today, and thank you, Sherry, for moderating. Appreciate it. I'll just tell a little bit about my personal story. So I grew up in Knox County, Ohio, specifically in Fredericktown. It's a really small town, kind of one of those one traffic light type towns. And I graduated with 88 kids in my high school class, just to give you an idea, of how small it was. But that Fredericktown, Ohio, is where our company was founded. That's where our headquarters were. So you see, we're a family-owned construction company still to this day. It was founded a little over 70 years ago by my grandfather. And currently, we have multiple businesses and we have around 5,000 team members that work across the Midwest and up and down the East Coast, and we do about $2 billion worth of work in the construction industry. And we do that through, we have 3rd-generation leadership right now, still in the family business, thanks to my grandfather's vision and his leadership, and then the 2nd generation that's gotten us to where we are today. But I grew up with that. That's what I grew up with. When I was small and I was young, I was walking around on job sites with a hard hat on. I was crawling up and down, backhoes and bulldozers and digging in the dirt. I grew up about a mile from our office too. So that was my playground. That's where I hung out. That's what I remember. And because of that, my family didn't know it at the time, but they were inadvertently building my confidence to be in a male-dominated industry. And if I look back on it, my first paycheck in the family business came from working in our accounting department between like 6th and 7th grade. So they kind of made me stop playing once I got that old. They made me work. I had to like file paperwork and copy blueprints. But from there, it just kind of, working in that accounting group and then working out in our equipment yard and our works department, and then going and getting a civil engineering degree from Ohio Northern University. Go Polar Bears, if any of you are here. Not as big of a clap as the Ohio State. And then, after college, the past 30 plus years, I've been, working in the family business, and I'll be celebrating 4 years as CEO of CK Construction here in a few months. So,
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your stories. I know, especially if any young women are in the audience or listening, we need women, more women like you, so they know that it is possible for them as well. You guys had family that supported you, but not everyone does. And so as Central Ohio continues to grow, and this growth is being driven by technology firms like Intel and the semiconductor manufacturing plants, an array of other new tech industries, if nothing is done, right? If we just say, oh, these are the statistics are the statistics, to address this gender gap in these STEM careers, what negative impacts will we see for all of us in this region? And I'll start with you, Tammy.
Well, that's an easy one for me, but first I have to say it's pretty incredible sitting up here with these boss women. And yeah. And while we're clapping for them, which is absolutely incredible, unfortunately, this is not the norm. So I think that that's something that I'm going to start my comments with, is we need more women in leadership positions. You heard the statistics. Over 51% of women are in the workplace, and then the statistics are absolutely staggering when we talk about leadership. They get worse when we get to the engineering and the science and the computer science degrees. So we've got to get girls into these activities younger. And a lot of people don't realize how far you have to reach back. A girl's STEM identity forms in the 3rd grade. So think about that. We're saying in high school, oh, let's throw things at them, let's get them involved and get them ready to go to the Ohio State University or wherever so that they can get these degrees and go out and represent. But if we're not feeding that pipeline early, then that's already diluted, and we're not going to get girls in there. And so that's one of the things that that we're doing is we are partnering with individuals and companies and institutions to get girls in that pipeline early and get them involved in activities often. Because, and I love, those that know me, I love it. My favorite acronym is FAIL. And people are like, seriously, Tammy? Those that know me, they know I'm a driver and all that. But FAIL to me means first attempt in learning. And in this world, we don't let our girls fail, because once they fail, they get up and then they succeed. So by having role models and partners that can help them fail and then succeed are going to help them get engaged, participate in activities that they may never have thought of, and then fuel that pipeline. And we can't forget about the caregivers either, because a lot of people will say, oh, girls, they need to go to college, they need to get a 4-year degree, they need to get into all these things. There's a lot of STEM careers out there that you do not need a 4-year degree for. And I know we're working really closely with CK Construction. I got it right? Okay, good. New branding, just had to throw it out there.
A little refresh this Monday.
Sorry. Anyway, to share with the girls and the caregivers some of those careers that are out there that they can get really good paying careers and set themselves up for success.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a long answer to a short question.
No, this is great. I mean, I'd love to hear it from the construction perspective and the education perspective. What if we just ignore this?
Sure. I go back to what I know and kind of, again, I think about, the way that I was raised, and I look at my dad. He worked in our construction business next to his dad and next to his 2 brothers, my uncles. But he was, interestingly enough, he was one of 5 kids. So there were 3 boys and there were 2 girls. So like in the scenario, where were the girls in the construction, in the STEM sector, right? Well, my aunts, they were there early on in their career. They were doing like in high school, they were doing some summer work at the company, but ultimately they did not see construction as a career trajectory for them, and they ultimately went a different direction. And as I look back on that, I try to imagine, where would they have been early in their career if they had had a female mentor in STEM? Would they have taken the trajectory to go straight into, the construction business? They ultimately did go into the construction business later in their careers and became leaders within the business, but where would we have been? And then it makes me reflect on my journey. And, again, I told you guys, I was out on the job sites, crawling around on equipment. I went into a male-dominated field for college. I was surrounded with that. So for me, I had confidence in that, thankfully, because of my family, to be in that male-dominated space. But I imagine where would I be, where would we be today if, when I went into construction, if there had been a female executive within our company, within our family construction business, or within the construction industry in general. There was a few. There was a very small handful, and they were tough. They were tough as nails. That generation, they had to fight really hard, to get to where they were. And they had I kind of feel like their perspective was more of, and I'm thankful for this now, but they kind of wanted to push down a little bit instead of pull up, because they wanted to teach us really, 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 really hard work. So thanks, I appreciate that. But everybody that I talk to in my generation now that is in a STEM leadership role, they want to break that cycle, and it's unanimous. They're more like, let's figure out how together we can pull, females up, so that we, pull them up into STEM and up into leadership. And those are 2 big kind of topics we can continue to tackle, but those are 2 voids that we still have.
I want to talk about the fact that this is a national crisis. So if you look at the data, one of the things about being an educator, we look out 20, 30 years out. And if you look at the decline in high school graduation rates, and yet when you look at college graduates, women are outpacing men. So now on average nationwide is about 56% is women. If you look at STEM, we have still been hovering around, a good year is like 25%. And if you talk to industry, you talk to companies, there is a shortfall of the workforce that has STEM abilities and capabilities. So I'm looking at 20, I'm looking at 30 years out, and basically companies will not be able to fill their jobs. So the cars that we like, the housing, the construction, if we don't have the talent, we can't build. And then we look at other countries that are actually double downing on this. They are engaging more women in their STEM workforce. It also then becomes us as a nation will lose our competitive advantage, and we're starting to see that already. So getting girls interested very early on is not just this is the right thing to do, is actually a crisis. We will not be able to continue as the nation that we are if we don't have every capable person from very early on contributing to the STEM workforce. And so that's what I worry about in terms of as an educator and looking at the 20, 30-year horizon.
Yeah, and I think that we find that not only are we currently seeing this gap, even if a woman chooses to enter a STEM field, the data suggests that they're still not met with equal pay, so that could be kind of a discouraging statistic. We're not finding that disparity in other sectors. It's actually wider in the STEM industry. A Stanford University study found that women earn $61,000 in their first job compared to $65,000 for men. So starting out, they have the same degree, same grade point averages, the salary gap begins in day one. And it widens over time, so that's shrinking women's savings and extending their debt burden. These disparities were also found in STEM academia fields in a study conducted by researchers from the University of Houston, University of California, Merced, and University of Colorado Boulder. And this, I'm a researcher, so this stuff, I just love it. When they compared the highest performing STEM researchers, so we're talking about researchers that are the top of the top of the top, They made about $6,000 less than men researchers in STEM. And then lastly, we see this a world that I know very well, which is women tech entrepreneurs. When women do raise their hand and say, yes, I want to enter the STEM field, I want to get involved, only 2% of VC funds are invested in women-only startups in the tech industry, where 80% of VC funds go to men-only startups. So again, severely reducing the chances of women to succeed in STEM, even when we do everything we can to push them into that. So my question for each of you is, what have you seen contributing to these pay disparities? What can you do, what are you doing to address not only the underrepresentation, but as well as the pay gap? And I'll let whoever go first.
Wow. Yes, the statistics are staggering. Thank you for all the
sorry.
research. No, thank you. I mean, like my gut reaction is, if we don't get this gap closed, I mean, women are going to look elsewhere for jobs, right? I mean, and the problem is, or the opportunity is, let me reframe that, we have so much opportunity for STEM jobs here in Central Ohio and in the entire state. I mean, you know, there's no shortage of that need. We've got, everyone knows Intel, the Honda LG battery facility, and we need to fill STEM jobs all the way from construction, which is today, all the way up through when those facilities are operating and have maintenance and everything. I think there's definitely positive change happening. One thing that I think of is the Governor's Executive Workforce Development Board. And one of the things, I served on that for about 5 years under a couple governors, and I feel like a couple of the positive things that they're doing, especially under Lieutenant Governor Husted and Governor DeWine's leadership, is workforce development across our region and across the state has been kind of fractured. There's a lot of good things that are happening, a lot of good things, but in a fractured manner. And they've been working very diligently the past couple years to try to bring those silos together and weave like a string to kind of tie those together. And one of the positive things that I really appreciate as a business owner, and I think hopefully gets to some of your question, they've added the in-demand jobs, and those are all publicly identified now. And so I think it's really important because now we have visibility on where those opportunities are, so we can all plan, whether we're a business leader or whether we're a student trying to figure out what career we want to go into, or whether we're an educator trying to plan what are we going to do next with our academic curriculum. But the thing that I like is it gives visibility to what the wages should be for that role. So hopefully some of that publicity and consistency and all the stakeholders seeing that will also help to close that gap if we have the visibility on that, especially in the STEM fields. That's one of the things I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
And I'll jump in. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, as we know. We all have a part to play in fixing this. And I come from a women's organization that supports girls, but we need men to be just as vocal on this as women. So I think that's first and foremost. We need a lot of different people speaking up, and we need to hit it at a lot of different angles. We're hitting the kindergarten through 12th grade, and I talked about how important it is to get girls interested, their caregivers interested, but we also need to hit it in the colleges and then afterwards. And then girls need to have not only role models, but also do the research and know what a job is worth and have the confidence to say, I'm worth earning this much money. And I say that because we know how girls' confidence peaks in the 5th grade, or maybe you don't. It's a pretty scary concept. Peaking in the 5th grade, so if they're going to go and say, well, I'm worth this amount of money because I know this is what it's worth, we need to teach them and support them as they stand up for what is right.
So I think one of the kind of piggybacking off of that, and so this comes from my work with a number of nonprofits and corporate boards. And one of the roles as a leader is to actually be much more proactive in this space. I think what happens is as employees, as talents navigate, some are more vocal about their raises or they push back, and others aren't. And as a leader, it really is our job to every year, every 2 years, every 3-year cycle to proactively look at the talent pool, to see if there are issues, and fix it without someone having to come to fix it. And what we find is that it makes it so that the entire employee base understands that this leader believes in equity, irrespective. And again, one of the things is when you look at all data, everyone benefits equally. So it's not just the one person that's the loudest and the brassest and argues for every single $2 that then, of course, outpaces everyone. Everyone is looked at. What I do also find is that also makes the leaders that report to that person and the other leaders, it starts changing culture of this is important to think about equity. This is important to think about family, life, work balance, and all of these things make it not just good for women, it makes it good for the entire organization. The best organizations do this proactively from the top, and all the leaders follow suit.
Which then benefits the community. So it just trickle down, trickle up effect.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so what we focus on grows, what we measure matters. So how should we collectively, as a community, as a society, be measuring the success of these different initiatives that we're putting into place to ensure that we're not having this panel in 15 years?
Well, can I just give another statistic?
Yes.
So we do not want to have this panel. We want to move the needle. Unfortunately, we haven't. And you think about, you talked about more money going into men's initiatives than women and girls. More money goes into pets than women and girls. And so to be understanding as a community as to what we're doing, and I know I said this before, we have to be intentional. We have to support those causes that are helping get our girls and women in these fields. Because, I mean, I don't know who in your families buy cars, but I buy a car for my family. I want the luxuries I want. I don't want things that don't make sense. And if you don't have women at the table in some of these, in the fields, in engineering, et cetera, then it's not going to be prosperous for the company. And money talks. So if companies realize that women bring value based on their knowledge, based on everything that they bring to the table, then they'll begin to support this, this cause. And I hope to heck we're not here in 15 years, but we have to do something today, and it has to be intentional.
And I'm just sitting here thinking as I look across the room, how happy I am to see so many males here today, because hopefully this means that you're mentors. I know me personally, one of my male mentors is here. The president of CK Construction, Jimmy, and I have a lot of mentors that have helped me get to where I am. Within my business, most of them they're all male within my business. When I go outside of my business, I do get to enter some females in, but thank you, Jimmy, for everything that you've done to help get me here. I could talk about all the ways that he's mentored me over the years, but one thing that I see that men can do is they can help mentor, but they can also ask questions. So one example that I'll give, because I'm, construction industry that's all I know, right? So one example I'll give is half of the workforce in the United States is female. In construction, 10% is female. So there's a big gap, right? So why is that? We need to continue to have a more inclusive environment. And I had last year, for the very first time, I received a piece of feminine, female fit personal protective equipment. It was a feminine fit safety vest. And in my entire career, I had never received something that was specifically feminine fit for construction. It didn't really exist for most of my career. And then when it did, it was hard to get your hands on, and a lot of times it wasn't quality. One of my team members found a feminine fit vest, came to me and said, hey, can we get these for our team members? And so we did, and that was a year ago. And then you guys just heard Tammy say, we just went through a brand refresh on Monday. Now it's baseline expectation. Like on Monday, we gave out packets of new PPE and all kinds of fun, clothing and stuff to our team members. And the baseline expectation of what was in that package, everybody got to pick. The baseline was only if it came in a feminine size, a female fit and a male fit could it be included in that packet. You couldn't offer something that was only a male fit. That's the first time think from an inclusivity standpoint where we went to that kind of a baseline. And so those kind of inclusive changes have to keep occurring or we're going to keep sitting here. And so females require feminine fit wear. You're a rocket scientist. I mean, right? She blows me away. Like, no. But I mean, so think about, some of you might remember a few years ago, you know, when NASA had female astronauts that were going to go to go up into space, and they did not have, it was not offered female fit protective equipment and spacesuits, right? So like we have to make these changes, and men can step up and ask, you know, what do you need to do your, you know, what kind of feminine fit stuff do you need to do your job correctly? So that's why I'm happy to see men sitting here, and maybe that can help, you know, us change in the future, so.
So I'm going to tell a little bit of a story based on that, because I think we had this conversation. So I was at NASA, and I was always asked, why didn't you want to be an astronaut? Because I love space. And the fact is I did apply. And what happened was there is a height limitation and requirement based on the average human size, right? And so I was too short. I mean, that was the reason, because the equipment was based on a range of like 5'1" to 6 feet, because that was considered the average. And so all the testing, all the experimentation, all of the protective gear was based on that. I was like, oh my gosh, like even the technology is biased against women. And so there's a bunch of different stories like that. Airbags, which unfortunately, they did a study, this was a couple of years, and they changed in terms of the dummies, but airbags killed more women than men. Why is this? Well, if you look back, at the time, the dummies that they used to test a lot of these things were based on an average human, which basically meant that you had different proportions, different weights, different heights, and so most women did not necessarily fit into the parameters. It also meant that more kids, if they were sitting in the front seat, were also killed. And so how you do that, you make the kids sit in the back. But if you're driving as a woman, and so I can give you countless examples, heart attacks, medication. There's medication that was tested on menopause that didn't enroll a single female. And so a lot of these things continue to happen. And so I think a lot of it's the allies, the mentorship. When you're in a room and you see that there's someone who's not included, actually speaking up and say, oh, like my representation is, you know, this, there's no one here that can talk about the other side. Maybe we should think about expanding this group. I think everyone can have a voice in that, and it makes it so that the technology actually then works for everyone.
Well, we're laughing, but breast cancer used to be with men only. So you think about that today, and I know we have Komen for the cure and everything, but it started with research on men until like the 90s, I think. And then I'd like to say it was a Girl Scout that introduced that, but it might have been an ally, a man that stepped up. So I agree with you guys. I think we need men and women both stepping up to help with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm glad that you're talking about some of these things, because the research also shows, we talked about what's keeping girls from entering. We talked about once women get there, the pay inequity they experience. And then the third thing that we're seeing is that more women are identifying that in a tech industry or STEM industry, they're experiencing gender discrimination, which leads to greater burnout. And so have you seen any, because I'm all about solutions, have you seen any effective interventions, and you've already mentioned a few that are really simple to do, but that's helped decrease this trend? So decrease discrimination, increase, job satisfaction, reduce burnout for women?
Are you guys looking at me for this?
Or what are you doing, Tammy? You're doing some great things.
No, I love this. I honestly think that we're talking about when we step up, and I said this over and over again, we've all said it. I think we need multiple people doing this, men, women, stepping up, lots of partners. I mean, that's, I think, the key. It can't just be women out there, because we know what the statistics say about women that are in leadership get bossy. I mean, but I like being a boss, and I like being a boss with all of these ladies up here. But we need men allies, women allies, leaders that look like our girls. Because if we have an organization and in your leadership position there are people that don't look like individuals who are looking to get to leadership, then they'll move on to somewhere where they do. And I think there's lots of partnerships that we need to reach out to be able to enhance what's happening. It's not just one organization. It's if you don't have the skills, bring another organization in that does and help us out.
Yeah, I just want to keep having this conversation here, but we are going to move to audience Q&A here in a little bit, so I'm going to ask our final question. But we will move to questions from our live stream and in-person audiences in just a few minutes. So if you do have a question, please make your way to the microphone now. And if you're watching online, you can type your questions into the chat. So before we do take audience questions, if you want to continue to address some of these solutions to gender burnout, Dr. Howard or Lori.
I can go. So, because solutions are harder. I think one of the things about the solutions, it comes from two camps. As a woman leader, you have to be okay with being called a boss, or bossy, or draconian, or a bee, or I'm going through all the things I've been called. And you just have to. I am. But I think if you decide to really lean into this as a leader, know that not everyone out in the world is going to be open and receptive. But take on that. But being very intentional and conscious that this is a war still in order to make it better for everyone. I think on the other side, it's this allyship. I can't talk enough about that, given that there's such a low percentage of women that are in the workforce, that are in STEM workforce. Women can't keep fighting and then do the work, do the job, right? And so it becomes really unfair if you have your women engineers that not only do they have to fight for equity, but then they also have to do the good job of, like, we teach them how to be engineers, not how to be advocates or political activists. We teach them how to be engineers. And to force that is just a disservice to the entire tech company's entire community. And so I think that allyship is really, really, really just as important as having women leaders that are like, you know what, I'm just going to bear this as my burden and make it so that it's good and better for everyone.
Can I just add one other thing? Diversity is not one person, one woman at the table. Because one woman at the table fighting, I mean, she'll fight, but you need a group. You need at least, I believe it's 30% in order to have impact. So just one doesn't do it. So we talk about allies, but you also have to have multiple women leaders at the table, multiple diverse leaders at the table if you're going to have that impact.
Great, thank you. Well, it looks like it's time for our audience questions. So it's CMC's long-standing tradition to take audience questions. Lainey Cuthbert with CMC is curating questions from today's live stream audience. And for those of you who are here in person, please join Lainey at the microphone. Out of respect for others, though, please keep your questions brief and to the point so we can get to as many questions as possible. We don't have a hook or a gong, but if your question does turn into a speech, we might just look for one. Also, please keep in mind that questions do end in a question mark. Lainey, what's our first question?
Thank you, Sherry. So Tanya Matthew from The Ohio State University asks, what skills, competencies, and support systems do you think are critical for women to create and develop their intellectual property and start companies, especially within academia?
So I'll start with, I do have a startup. It's now a nonprofit. So it's been in existence now, I guess, 8 years. And I think one of the biggest things that I take away in terms of academia and even just a startup is perseverance. And understanding that just because you might have the best gadget in the world, if no one wants it, it's not of value. So really being in touch with the community, with your stakeholders to actually figure out what's the need and match it to the technology that you want to build. But you have to persevere, persevere, persevere.
I don't have anything to add.
Oh, I would say grit is always something that you heard me talk about the fail piece. You have to be willing to fail and then get up and then keep going. And then I also think you have to know your markets. Like you need to know a lot of different skills, so just be aware of what you're doing. I think, Dr. Howard, you mentioned that. Know what's out there, know what the obstacles are, so that you can problem solve, which is something that we all need to be able to do, is problem solve for any job. So your entrepreneurial fields aren't any different than a lot of other skill sets that you need, but that grit, perseverance is probably key.
Good afternoon, ladies. My name is Alyssa Payne. I'm with TouchView Interactive. Relatively new as a woman in tech as of January this year, so very inspired to be among you. Thank you so much. My question is, as a woman in tech who has heavily relied on mentorship, particularly from other women, which I do appreciate, what are some practical applications that I can take with me and start implementing into my immediate communities today?
I'll give one example of something that we're doing within our companies. We are doing what's called a Women's Ideas and Strategies Exchange Program, and we started this. I co-founded it with some of our other team members. Gosh, it's probably been like 8 or 10 years ago. We had been watching. We had attended a seminar that the CEO of Cardinal Health had just given. And we were also there, the Mayor Ginther, his wife was there with the Columbus Women's Commission. And it just inspired us that we needed to do something for the female specific within our organization. So we started this program. And in order to start the program, you speak about community. What did we do first? The first thing we did was we reached out to the community and asked people, asked other companies, what were they doing? What best practices do you have? So that we can learn from you. And people opened up their arms. I mean, everyone welcomed us in, gave us information, and I mean, and then you just get more and more excited, right, from the ripple effect of that. And so then we started our own program, and this year we are right now we're in the middle of our 3rd group of females going through the program, and it's everything from coaching and mentoring, spending time with senior leadership, programming specifically for them, and so the reason I'm bringing this up is because I would love to pay it forward and give that back. So anybody today, I'll stick around after, but anybody that wants to talk to me about what we're doing there so that we can give that back into the community to help, whether you're in businesses or parents. I'm also, I'm a mother of 2 young daughters, so anything we can do to pay it forward, right? I'll stick around and help share that and share the information from that program, so. Hope that helps.
So just building off of that, want to address a little bit of the mentorship. I think there's 2 kind of paths when you think about mentorship. That's the mentorship that you give others, and then there's the mentorship that you receive. I think a lot of times we don't realize that we need to go out and say, hey, I would love to be your mentor. You're bright, you're smart, I can kind of see something, versus them saying, hey, would you be my mentor? What I find is one that empowers the mentee a lot of times, like, oh my gosh, this person actually wants to mentor me, I must have something. 2, you get so much personal satisfaction when you're actually giving advice. Whether they take it or not is another thing. But when you give that personal advice and you see them progress and grow, and so that personal satisfaction, but then also paying it forward, I think is really, really essential in this mentorship space.
I think you both nailed it.
Well, can I just say one thing really quick? Since you said that we nailed it, I think Tammy, you guys are nailing it. You and the Girl Scouts, and am I allowed to talk
Yes,
about the?
and it's
so,
on the table so that
everyone
they
has on
can-
their tables. So, right here in our Central Ohio community, 2 weeks from now, we're getting ready to break ground on a STEM Leadership Center. So talk about paying it forward and doing it every single day, what the Girl Scouts do. I mean, they touch more girls in this country than anyone else. And we talk about building their confidence and how it decreases, like you said, from 9 years old or from 5th grade, or debatable, but at a way too young age. So I just want to say thank you for everything that you guys are doing, and we're excited to see that project go up in our community. And I'm gonna give a little bit of a shameless plug too. They still need $3 million more.
So on your tables, there is some information about it. And if you want to write a check, you can like see us later. No, but this wouldn't have been possible without the community investments. And I know that Battelle introduced us, CK Construction, you all, Nationwide, AEP. There's been so many companies and individuals in this community that understand the issues that we're facing and the challenge that is right now for our future workforce. So this is starting at the beginning of the pipeline. There's a lot of people that we need along the way to make success for the jobs now, because I think there's like 4,000 STEM jobs in Columbus alone that are going unfilled right now. And so with these companies coming into town, it's going to be a lot more. So we need to fill that pipeline today so that we have that future workforce. So thank you for plugging this. Yes, we do need $3 million, and we're grateful to all of the community partners that we have because we always consider ourselves as experts in girls. This is for girls. This is for all youth because we'll have field trips out there, and it's going to be a community resource as well. And the partners are not just funders, it's partners in programming because we don't know it all. And so to get the diverse representation in the industries and women leaders, those are the partners that we're pulling together for this great project, which is going to support our school systems, which need some help.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Warren Fishman. I was sitting here thinking, why do we have Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts? I think when both genders are exposed to the same things, we don't think of girls on camping trips or whatever. More important, I think brownies and Cub Scouts. I think at the young age, if they're exposed to each other and the same activities, the girls would have more confidence to take those leadership roles. So that's my question. Thanks.
So I love this question because I love to give you the research, and the research shows, I'm jumping right in. Girls learn best in an all-girl environment. You know, they have a place where they can, that research is out there, it's undisputed. Do y'all know how boys learn best? It's in a co-ed environment. So when we put boys and girls together for a learning environment, it's not helping the girls, it's helping the boys. So we really have to think about, and there's advantages out there. I'm not saying that there aren't good times or good lessons out there, but if we truly want to talk about addressing this gender issue, then we need environments where girls can gain the courage, and they gain the courage when they're with other girls. So I had to jump in.
Oh, that's good.
Sorry, guys.
All right. Next question.
Just an aside, my best mentors in higher education have been women, and I do appreciate that, I really do. You mentioned being intentional, and I've always thought that benign neglect works very well to maintain the status quo. You definitely do need to be intentional about societal changes. I am wondering what kinds of things you've encountered as you were intentional, good or bad.
Yeah, so I can actually wrap it to my NASA days. So everywhere I go, it's always about, I truly believe that you have to have diversity of thought, you have to have diversity of experience to build good technology. So starting at NASA, actually started a mentorship program for at-risk girls in STEM. Every single one was at risk, eventually went to college, and then they didn't come to NASA because, we don't make any money, but they became, engineers or computer scientists. At Georgia Tech, I ran a number of these mentorship workshops to make sure that our undergrad students and grad students maintained their skills and kept with a degree. And I also work with, at the time, students with disabilities. Again, making sure that we have representation in the space of STEM. And so, and here at Ohio State, we have actually have started moving the tide. Just this last cycle, I had 11% increase in female faculty and a 10.6% increase in our women entering class of engineers. And these are intentional things, but it's around, we actually have our students going into the high school say, you can come to The Ohio State and major in engineering. So we have a bunch of these things where we are intentionally going to the community and saying, yes, you too can be an engineer at Ohio State. It's a lot of work, though.
And I would say access to programs so that our youth can get and our girls can get familiar with some of these things that are non-traditional. I don't know how many women out there do think about going into the construction industry. However, I think that's important to give them hands-on, because they're going to let me drive the digger later, right? I'm just kidding. That's a kind of an inside joke. But I mean, having access to things, and not just say, well, you're a girl, that's nice. You can go and do marketing. You can go be a nurse, which is science. You can do the traditional fields, giving them opportunities and access and to those non-traditional fields. And a lot of girls do not have, and youth in general, do not have the funds to do these activities. A lot of the schools do not have the ability to pay for some of these activities in some of these untraditional fields. So we really have to make access available.
I want to make sure this young woman has the opportunity to ask her question. So we have time for one more question.
Sorry, I got excited.
Hi. As a senior at Columbus School for Girls and as someone who's headed to Tufts University to study computer science, what advice would you have for me and my fellow peers as we start our careers?
I would say, as an entering freshman, make sure you find your community and your cohort. So one of the best things is when you find your cohort and community, you'll realize that everyone's going through the same thing, especially as a freshman. It's not just you. It's not an isolated event. And what that means is you kind of move together. And I will tell you, at the universities, I'll see students that started in a cohort, and they kind of take the same classes, and they work together. And as a cohort, they all do better than the person who's like, I can do it by myself. I'm smart enough. I can beat the professors. It's like, no. And so really try to find your community as soon as you get to campus.
I would say believe in yourself. You can do this. You have been successful up throughout your whole career. Just keep believing in yourself. Even when it's sometimes hard, you can do this.
So just to tack on, just be intentional about the people that you surround yourself with. So have an intention with that group. And it might be a certain group your freshman year, and it's okay if that group changes your sophomore year. Understand, think about what your needs are, and then just fill those voids with being intentional of who you surround yourself with. And that should carry, you can do that all through your career. So good luck to you.
Thank you. I wish we did have more time, but I am getting the wrap-up signal. So I'll turn it back over to Deb for final concluding marks.
So I learned today that my career path of deciding to explore being an astronaut is not going to work out because they do not have a spacesuit for this 4'11" body. It's very disappointing. I'm going to have to stay in lobbying. Just kidding. But I hope everybody will take away the thought of finding a little one in your life that has not yet made it to third grade and make sure that we are fostering her interest in STEM and being naturally curious, as all children are. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for attending this year's Jeffrey Family Legacy Fund Forum. And thank you to our sponsors today, Battelle, CK Construction, and the Jeffrey Company. Thank you to the Grange Insurance Audubon Center, our virtual seat patrons, and to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. And our very special appreciation to today's speakers, Lori Gillette, Ayanna Howard, Tammy Wharton, and our host, Sherry Cheney Jones. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Please make sure you make plans to attend next week's forum, Wednesday, Electric, Autonomous, and Green, the Future of Personal Transportation, right here at the Grange Insurance Audubon Center. Please take a moment to answer that survey we mentioned in your forum flyer. Thank you for being here. We couldn't do it without you. Have a wonderful day.